Welcome to Growthcast, insights for B2B leaders, where we uncover the stories of founders, CEOs, and growth leaders in every business to see how we can learn. Today we have Tom. Nice to have you.
Good to be here, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure having you as a guest today. For our audience, do you mind doing a brief introduction around yourself and what you do?
So my name's Tom Froggatt. I am the founder and CEO of two companies, one called Singular, which is a biotech specialist search, recruitment, and leadership development company, and one called Versapia. And at Versapia, we're building an AI-powered operating system for high-performance cultures. So to really improve the sort of effectiveness of teams and environments for science, tech, and innovation-driven companies.
Nice, that's amazing. And what brought you to starting both companies? Maybe let's start with the first and then go to the second.
Yeah, yeah. So Singular's been around a lot longer. So Singular I started 6.5 years ago now. So I've been in people, talent, and culture for almost 20 years now, and I started my career in recruitment, and I worked in a really large company. So 3,500 people in 35 countries.
Yeah.
And I was part of their life sciences team. So I sort of accidentally fell into the pharma and biotech sector through that. Worked for a couple of different places, and after after about, what would it have been, 14, 15 years, I'd kind of always had this itch to start something of my own.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people get it, right? You want to do something in the way that you want to do it, and you see ways you could do things better, and kind of, that starts to play on your mind. I don't think I had the confidence to do it when I left my first company because I'd been there for 10 years. As I said, it was a pretty big company. And I think when you're in that environment, you're always kind of thinking, well, how much of it was me and how much of it was the company?
Yeah. The branding.
But I went to a smaller company and kind of, there was lots of good things about it, but there was lots of things that we needed to change. And so I spent a couple of years really re-engineering that business. And as I did, I kind of realized actually I could do this for myself. So we put together, or I put together a plan to sort of look at, well, how could we do things a little bit differently? And that was where Singular really came from. So that was 6.5 years ago. We we wanted to focus really on what customers needed rather than what we wanted to sell them. I'd kind of looked around the recruitment industry at the time, and everyone was kind of doing and saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So it became really hard to differentiate. So I spent a long time just going out and talking to potential customers about what do they find difficult, what do they like about their current providers, what don't they like, where are the gaps, what are the areas they find most difficult. And so we started out by focusing on drug discovery, which is the super scientific end of R&D in biotech in drug development,
Yeah.
and that's still the bulk of what we do. And then over the last 6 years, we've really evolved the business to really respond to what our customers have been telling us they need. So we do lots of things. We do executive search, we do talent partnerships where we run entire sort of talent functions for clients. We have a leadership development program or a couple of leadership development programs for people who are emerging leaders. We work across Europe and the US as well as the UK now. And everything we've done has really been in response to what customers have needed. I've not really paid that much attention to the competition. Maybe I should pay a bit more, but yeah, that's kind of what started the company and how we ended up where we are today.
Yeah, and you've been running it for 6 years now, I'm sure.
Hmm.
First company, lots of challenges have come
Oh
around
yeah.
about growing it. What are one or two of the biggest challenges that you had to face, and what did you do to overcome them?
Yeah, well, I think the first one I look back on was I tried to grow the company too early and too quickly. So I hadn't really sort of established a customer base and a repeatable way of winning new business and things like that before I started to try and grow the business. I kind of just thought that we would figure it out along the way. And also, interestingly, the first few hires that we made, I think I had a bit of imposter syndrome around them and probably didn't push for. They were good people, but we probably didn't push for sort of that higher caliber of person or that more experienced person that would have really made a difference. So yeah, tried to grow the business and it didn't really work. And so we went, in a 12-month period, we went from a 300 grand profit to a 200 grand loss,
Oh,
which was pretty spectacular. Had to re-engineer the business, re-engineer our positioning, our brand, our service offering, all that, our culture, all that kind of thing. That was, in the midst of COVID as well. So that created some challenges too in terms of training people and that kind of
yeah,
thing. Um, and then I think more recently, it's been a difficult economy for everyone and a difficult market for everybody. In biotech, there are some unique challenges, which are kind of caused by some of the stuff that's happening in the US, but also some of the funding cycles. A lot of the companies are venture-backed, pre-revenue companies, so they rely on investment, and investment is difficult to come by at the moment.
yeah,
And so there's been a particularly challenging sort of 12, 18 months, and it's also, I'm sure you guys see this as well. It's also been a period where a lot of the stuff we used to do in sales and marketing that was really effective doesn't really work that well anymore, like cold outbound email and a lot of this sort of stuff. So we've had to re-engineer a lot of that. So it's been a really, I mean, it's been really challenging, but it's been really interesting as well. Like it's been a really fascinating challenge to try and
yeah,
figure out, okay, what works now and navigate all the change that continues to happen. But yeah, those would be the couple of things I think, sort of growing too quickly, going from a profit to a loss in such dramatic fashion. Because, when we hit 300 grand of profit in that year, I thought I cracked it. I
yeah.
thought I knew what I was doing, right?
Next year's the million.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But then particularly recently, it's been really interesting.
Yeah, that's right. I've got two key questions off the back
Hmm.
of that. Firstly, of course, with every entrepreneur, I'm sure this comes across their mind. Once you go from like a big win to a loss like 200K, I'm sure probably it crossed your mind, should I just go back to the job and I know I've got guaranteed six figures and the brand behind me? How did you kind of overcome that and just carry on pushing forward through the business?
Do you know what? I don't think I ever really thought about going back to work for someone else.
Yeah.
Um, I'm sure my wife did. Uh, I think I've kind of made myself pretty unemployable at this point. I'm not very good at sort of. I don't think I'd
Understand.
be a very good employee anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I think where I got to was just, we've got to make this work. And it was interesting. One of the things that I kind of realized as I was going through that period was that as we were underperforming and, you start seeing the bank account drop and the money go and all that kind of stuff. I was really focusing on, oh my God, we've only got this long left, or like this is like if something goes wrong, we're really in it now, and we've got to figure something out. And I was focusing on all the negative stuff that was happening,
Yeah.
and unsurprisingly, that was then the stuff that kept happening. We kept heading more and more towards that negative outcome. And it was only really when I realized that things started to turn around. I kind of had lost sight of what I actually wanted from the business and what the real outcome we were trying to achieve was. And when we sort of reconnected with that and stopped focusing as much on, you still have to think about the finances, but you start focusing on, well, where are we actually trying to go? What difference are we trying to make?
Yeah.
What's our goal? What's our mission? That was when things started to turn around, and that shift of focus is really hard.
Yeah. During those times, it's either like you're focused on the finances, or that's where really the creative thinking comes in. It's like, okay, how do I get out of this? Clearly, everything I'm doing is not working.
Yeah.
What should I do now?
Yeah, there is kind of like I say, you don't want to focus too much on the the negative ending, right? But there is a benefit to being up against the wall like that because
Yeah,
you got to do something. And even if you're not sure what to do, you got to try something. So you do start to be a bit more creative about these things for
absolutely.
sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially when you've shut the door and going back to the employee side, you kind of have to spend all your time and energy focused on the outcome.
Do you know what? I'm a big believer in this. Like, I think Plan B is really dangerous.
Yeah,
I don't think Plan B is a great idea. It's that whole idea of like if you want to take the island, you got to burn the boats, right? You
yeah,
you put yourself in a position where you've got no choice but to make it work, and then usually you figure out how to make it work.
yeah, yeah. I see quite a lot of posts recently on social media where it's like, oh, I'm going to buy the most expensive car in the world that I can't afford to make me think of how can I afford it. It's similar to in the business, like you've got all these costs, you need to figure out somehow to make the finances work, etc.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that might not be the most
It's
advisable
extreme situation,
thing
yeah,
to
but
do, but yeah, if you don't give yourself any other option, you will find a way.
yeah.
It might not be the way you want to do it, or it might not be the way you expected to do it, but you'll find a way.
Absolutely. And with that, of course, the creative thinking led on to
Mm.
you thinking about, okay, what's the modern way of sales and marketing?
Yeah.
Without you giving away your golden goose now, as I'm sure you figured it out, what's kind of the strategic thinking you went about of like getting new clients without the traditional methods?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a really good question. So, we tried lots of things, and most of the stuff we tried didn't work. So, previously, the way that we'd generated most of our business was cold calls, cold emails, and then building around the relationships we had. So we had referrals, and we still have referrals, but they were becoming quite ad hoc. Like we didn't have much control over when we got those referrals, and they weren't really enough to sustain what we
Yeah,
needed to do. Um, and we just saw over time that the the amount we were getting from the outbound stuff we were doing was going down and down and down and down. And it wasn't that we were doing anything with less quality. It was just, there was more and more outbound stuff happening. Everybody was getting a bit blind to it, and it
yeah,
just it just wasn't having the impact. There was one thing that we were doing that was continuing to work, and that's that I've hosted a podcast for 6 years, 6.5 years,
yeah,
where I interview people who like I would want as clients. So I interview them about their careers and about like their journey through the industry and that kind of stuff. And that was still generating results. So we really lent into that. We tried a ton of stuff. We did a load of webinars. Some of those worked at the beginning, but then they kind of petered out.
yeah,
We did loads of content, ebooks and videos and a whole bunch of different stuff. We created and it's still live actually. We created a culture vault, which was a load of free resources around how to build a high performance culture. And what we were seeing was that some of this stuff would get some traction, but not all of it. And so what we realized was we had to build lots of different legs to the table, if you like. So,
yeah,
we continued to do a lot of content, a lot of personal brand stuff for me around LinkedIn particularly. We really lent into referrals. Like we started really heavily incentivizing referrals amongst our clients. So we'd offer 5 grand of credit to any client who
yeah,
gave us a referral that turned into a client. And, we were able to do that because on average, each client on an annual basis is worth like 45, 50 grand to us. So giving them 5 grand of credit is worth doing. And then we had to start being smart about who we were targeting. So we'd spent a lot of time and we'd had a lot of success with it, targeting early stage companies. So companies like before they had their team in place, before they'd really put all their processes in and that kind of stuff, we were able to give them a lot of value. And that was fine when the fundraising market was good because a lot of those companies, we'd do a lot of free work for them, but then a lot of them would go and raise money. But we were just seeing that less and less of them were raising money. And so we were doing more and more free work and more time spent contacting, talking with, meeting with, doing stuff for people who just never managed to secure any funding. And it wasn't their fault. It was just that the market was tighter. And so we had to really refocus on larger companies, more established companies. And I think there was probably a bit of an inferiority complex about that in that, we were kind of like, well, we know we can add value to these smaller companies. Can we really add that much value to larger companies? And then when you think about it, it's really obvious. Like, firstly, it's really obvious to target companies that have some money to pay you, um, which, in hindsight, sounds ridiculous. We weren't doing
yeah,
it. But secondly, the more people a company has, the more people issues they have. And so actually we found that the need was often greater in these slightly larger companies than it was in the early stage ones.
yeah.
So lots of things. And we continue. I don't think we've got the perfect formula now, but we continue to try and find new things. And then I guess the key thing is like when you find something that works, carry on doing it until it doesn't work anymore.
When it rains, it pours, as they say.
Well, yeah, but also I think we get bored before the market gets bored.
Yeah,
And really, just because you don't want to do the same webinar over and over again, or you don't want to send out the same piece of content or whatever it is, if it's working, then you got to make the most of that. And eventually it will probably stop working. And you've got to keep an eye on that. Like you've got to keep an eye on your response rates and your
Yeah.
conversion rates and all that kind of stuff. But as long as yeah, you being bored is actually a good thing in in business development, I find,
Yeah.
because it means something's working.
Absolutely. Well, that makes sense. And that's usually where you hire someone else to do it at that point.
Yeah.
And then you scale up your skill set and focus on more strategic thinking. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point actually for founders particularly, and particularly sales focused founders. There's kind of all this stuff around hire people who are better than you. And I fully agree with it in principle. But if you haven't figured out how to sell what you're doing, if you haven't figured out how to get customers, it's really hard to bring someone in and expect them to do it for you.
Yeah.
Because no one knows the product or the service or whatever it is like you. And so once you have a repeatable process that 20% of your leads convert to this, and then 30% of those convert to a customer, and like once you've got that really mapped out, then you can bring someone in, and if they're better than you, they can start to improve on it. But you've got to give them something to work with in the first place. And I think I see a lot of founders bringing in salespeople and just expecting them to then make something happen, but
Yeah.
there's no structure around it.
Absolutely. Sales is still the one thing I can't let go of in the business. It's the only thing I enjoy transparent. Besides the strategic thinking, that's the only thing I really enjoy. I get
Yeah.
everything else, the delivery, but I know 100% there's a lot more better people than me, and it was proven once I hired them, results tripled. So,
Yeah.
but
Well, you
sales,
got
I
to.
agree with you. I can't let that go because I don't see anyone speaking with the same conviction as I can. Right? Sales is mainly conviction.
Yeah, and I don't think you should ever plan to stop. I think I've got a guy on my advisory board who he ran a Nasdaq listed company worth, so they were doing probably 5 to 10 billion in sales annually and all this, like they were very, very high level company. And he was the CEO and he would still go out on sales calls. I mean, they were
Yeah.
the big ones, right? They were the $500 million contract
Of
ones and
course.
things like that. But I remember talking to him about this. He was like, "You will never be able to stop selling. Like you should never step away from the sales side of your business. But you can start to be more selective about what you're involved in. And of course, sales is always, no matter how good you are at it, it's always a numbers game, right? So you've always got to do a certain amount of activity to get a result. And as your business gets bigger and as there's more stuff going on, and bigger could be just in terms of how many customers, right? It doesn't have to be people. There's less and less time to do that activity, and that's when everything starts to dry up. If you're the only source of it,
Yeah.
you've got to supplement that. But yeah, you probably always be involved in those key
Yeah,
conversations.
absolutely. I enjoy it. There's many business owners I've met that sales is the thing they hate the most. So
Okay.
I'm happy I'm one of the ones, and you're probably one of the ones where sales is an enjoyment piece.
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Great. And then now moving on to business number two, right? You've been
Yes.
through 6 years of challenges, finding growth, sales and marketing, thinking of new things to do. What led you to open a second business or start one
Mhm.
versus just doubling down on the one you've been building for 6 years?
Well, so we are continuing with Singular, and Singular is still very much a going concern. It's doing really well. We're having a good year so far, so like that's still going. But one of the things that I spent a lot of time looking at earlier in the year was how do we really get more leverage on the activity or the effort that we're putting in? And so we'd grown Singular to be kind of a bit of a hybrid business. We still had this really strong search and recruitment practice. We had this leadership development business. And then we had this consulting practice, which was really about creating high performance culture and how teams can be more effective and all that kind of stuff, a whole bunch of different stuff underneath that. But it was very manual and it was pretty difficult when I was looking at how do we grow it, it was pretty difficult to scale because the amount of knowledge that you need to have, you need good people who really know what they're doing to deliver that kind of work and to win that kind of work. And that's expensive. And getting them really sort of trained up and knowledgeable about all the stuff we can do was difficult. And when I was looking at going forward and how we grew it, I kind of thought, well, this is going to be difficult. And then at the same time, as I said, we're having a good year, but it's been really hard work. Like 2025 has been difficult.
Yeah.
And so financially, we're about where I'd want us to be, but the amount of effort we've had to put in to do that has been significant. And earlier in the year, we needed to be at 200 grand to be on target from a sales perspective by that point in the year, and we were there. But I remember like coming home from work one day and just thinking, I've never had to work this hard for 200 grand in my entire life. Like this is mental how hard we're having to work for this. Not just me, the entire team. And so I started to look at, well, how do we multiply that effort? How do we multiply the return we get on that effort? There must
Yeah.
be a higher leverage way of doing this. And we explored a number of different options, and we kind of realized that because of where LLM technology is now, and because of all the IP we'd built up around our consulting business, actually we were able to combine those two things to build an AI platform to do most of the consulting work that we were doing in a really personalized, really tailored way for different companies. But of course, we could do that without charging as much. We could do it in a more scalable way. There wasn't as much of a time constraint with that sort of technology as there would be with human consultants. So essentially, we've spun out a business called Versapia, which we're building the platform right now, but it will take all the best elements of what we do in our like high ticket consulting and put those into a company through an AI tool. And at the core of it, there's a custom LLM, a custom AI called Verity. And Verity essentially helps companies to diagnose their culture, to design a plan to improve their culture, and then to deliver that plan by doing several things, but creating workshops, putting communication plans together, coaching managers and leaders on like how they can behave in a culturally aligned way, a whole bunch of different stuff. So yeah, really what we were looking at was how do we generate more leverage and more scale, but in a way that would be really tailored to individual companies. And I just think that the technology is now at a point where that's really possible. And then when we looked at how to actually take that to market, we kind of felt that our proposition was getting a bit confusing because we had all these different
So many
parts, and now we
parts.
were going to add this platform into it, and kind of it was just I kind of looked at it. I tried to look at it objectively, and I thought, like, if I didn't know anything about the company, would I be able to figure out really clearly what we did? And the answer was probably no. So what we decided to do was refocus Singular very much on search talent and leadership development for biotech and stay really niche on that. And then to spin out this other company, which we've now called Versapia, to develop the platform and build the culture consulting on top of that. And we're not just limiting that to biotech. So that's designed for companies that are driven by science, technology, and innovation. So kind of it's a broader focus. We're really targeting earlier stage companies, so companies less than 1,000 people are really kind of the
Hmm.
ones we have in mind with it. But yeah, having that differentiation of brand then meant we could get a lot cleaner in all of our messaging, and we could make it really obvious to people what each company did. And actually, this only been 4 weeks, actually, we spun it out, and already we're starting to see more traction on both sides because of the clarity of the message.
Absolutely. And how have you gone about promoting? Yeah, as well as it the same methods, going on podcasts, interviewing your ideal clients, etc.
We're gonna do that, yeah. So I haven't started the podcast yet, but that's one of my jobs for next month. There's a blog that I write that has been I already wrote a blog, but it was very biotech focused, and I've kind of repositioned that to be a bit broader and a bit more about technology and culture and the intersection between the two. So that's called for Sapiens. People can go and sign up for that. We have launched a waiting list. People can get more insight into that. So I sent an email to the waiting list today to say, hey, Verity is live and being trained. What questions do you want to ask her? And then they're sending me a bunch of questions, and I'm then sending them like a screen share of her answering those questions, which is
Nice.
kind of cool. There's been some really interesting questions there. So we're probably 5 or 6 months away from the first version of the product being ready. And we're just trying to build as much of a kind of community around it, a bit of anticipation around it as we can. the good thing is that as soon as you start talking about AI, people start listening.
Yeah,
So
buzzword now.
yeah, exactly. So it's not that heavy a lift. But yeah, similar strategies. We're just targeting them at slightly different people, and we've got an outbound sales function or an outbound salesperson that's also doing that as well. So her focus is on getting people to come and sign up for the waiting list and like taking people through demos of the concept and that kind of stuff. What we'd really like to do is launch with, you know, 1,000, 2,000 people who've put their hand up and said, "Yeah, I'd be really interested in this," and then that makes day one of actually selling probably
Yeah.
a fun day.
Yeah, okay, break those records and you'll go
Hopefully.
from the hardest 200K you've ever had to work for, probably the easiest.
Yeah, I hope so. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, that's amazing. And someone just popped into mind. You mentioned before how you would be making a lot of material, webinars,
Mm.
playbooks, etc. Right? Essentially lead magnets.
Yeah.
And in businesses, that's a very common term. But when I'm speaking with a lot of recruitment companies, they're always thinking, okay, what lead magnet can I make, right? Because
Mm.
we can give them the best practices of hiring, but then they'll just go do it themselves. So a lot of them want to keep that to themselves, right? What's been your approach with lead magnets and how has it been perceived when you give away that valuable information?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back over my content that I've put on LinkedIn personally over the last 6 years, like I have literally given away everything I know. Like I haven't really kept a curtain in front of every anything. It's not all been in one go. Like it's been over the
Yeah.
course of sort of
But if
hundreds
someone
of
reads through
videos.
everything, puts it together, yeah.
You could do technically, yeah, I'm sure you could. Um, but I don't think that's been detrimental to our business at all. I think that's been really helpful for us. I think we're not doing something that people don't people can't do for themselves. Like we know how to do it better. We know how to do it faster. We know how to do it more effectively. We know how to do it with greater quality. But you can feasibly do it yourself. It's not the lack of knowledge that stops people. Sometimes there are some very niche positions that we work on where like it is actually more difficult to find the people. But a lot of the time it's about the amount of time it takes someone else. Like because of our expertise, we can do it much more quickly than someone else. And we have the right resources, right? We have people who are trained in it. We have the right technology. We have a network that we tap into. We have a talent community that we've built over the last 6 years of thousands and thousands of people who want to know about biotech jobs, and they're the right sort of people for these companies. So we just have tools, knowledge, and resource that allows us to do it more effectively. But in terms of the lead magnets, I've tended to find that if you if you can solve a problem for someone, a small problem for someone with a lead magnet, then they'll typically go, okay, well, actually, if you can solve that problem really quickly, then you can probably solve this other problem as well, and
Yeah,
this is a more substantial one. And so, yeah, I think give it away. It's not going to harm your business. If anything, it's going to show that you know what you're talking about.
absolutely. I completely agree. I like that. And then to wrap everything up, what would be one piece of advice or thought you would give to another founder growing their business?
Yeah. One piece of advice. Can I do two?
I'll let you have to.
All right, thank you, Alex. Um, the first is that I think everything good that we've done has come from not us thinking about how can we get more money out of this. It's come from us thinking about how can we add more value to our customers? Like, what do our customers really need? What challenges are they facing? And like sometimes we've come up with stuff we haven't been able to help with. So, back in 2022, one of the major challenges that all my clients were facing was they needed to raise money and it was difficult. And I couldn't really help them with that very much. Like there wasn't anything I could really do directly. I did some podcasts with some investors in the sector and sort of talked about, well, what do you look for and what mistakes do you see people making? And some of those were quite helpful. But that was all I could really do. So you'll come up with some problems that you can't solve. But if you're looking at what problems do my customers have consistently, you'll find other ways you can help them. And I think as well, if your business is customer focused rather than competition focused, then it's going to be much easier for you to differentiate what you're doing. There's too many companies look at their competitors and just copy what
Yeah,
they're doing, and then they say, "Yeah, but we do it better, we do it faster, we're
yeah.
nicer than them, we
Boring stuff.
charge a
Yeah,
little bit less than them," and like no one cares, right? So that's the first thing is just be really, really focused on your customer. I think the other thing is that the pace of change that we're seeing right now is faster than it's ever been before, and I don't think it's going to slow down. I think, the more work I've done on Versapia on the new company, the more sort of deep I've gone into the world of AI, and you know, the technology is further ahead than most people realize it is right now, and it's going faster and faster and faster every day. How you run your business today is not how you will run your business next year. And you've got to get comfortable with that. And I think, you balance that with what I said earlier in terms of when you find something that works, ride it out until it doesn't work anymore. But be prepared that there will be a point where it stops working and you need to do something different. And I think the thing that's helped me the most over the last probably 12 months is just really embracing that and kind of going, all right, let's see what this week's going to throw at us.
Yeah.
It's kind of that it's difficult, it's hard work, but it's supposed to be hard. If you want to make something big and successful and worthwhile, then it's probably going to be difficult. So I think just embrace that change, but be aware that things are going to change and constantly be scanning for what's changing, what things are not working as well as they used to, and what are the other ways that we can look at that, which kind of all to do that effectively, you've got to measure stuff, right? And monitor stuff and do all the KPI stuff and all that kind of thing, which a lot of businesses don't have great discipline around. So like there's a whole bunch of different things within there. But yeah, just sort of throw yourself into the challenge of the change because it's not going to slow down.
Absolutely. I really like that. And then for our audience, where can they find you if they want to speak with you more, get your services, sign
Yeah, of
up to the
course.
wait list?
Well, yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So they can get in touch with me there. If they're interested in Versapia, they can go to www.versapia.ai, which is Versapia dot AI. And there's a wait list. They can sign up to the blog there. They can see videos and more information. But yeah, either that or find me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to chat.
Amazing. I'll include both in the description, of course. But pleasure having you on as a guest today, Tom, and look forward to potentially having a part two of this.
Perfect. Cheers, Alex.
Pleasure.